The morning sun cast long shadows across the grand corridors of Buckingham Palace as King Charles made his way to his private study. The familiar weight of the crown had settled upon his shoulders months ago, yet each day brought new challenges that tested his resolve as monarch. Today would prove to be unlike any other in his reign. Charles had always been a man of routine. His morning tea, prepared exactly as he preferred, awaited him on the mahogany desk alongside the daily briefings from his private secretary. But something felt different this particular Tuesday morning. The palace staff seemed unusually quiet, their usual cheerful greetings replaced by nervous glances and hushed whispers. As he settled into his leather chair, Charles noticed an unmarked envelope placed deliberately beside his teacup. The paper was cream-colored and expensive, the kind used for important correspondence. No royal seal adorned it, no official markings indicated its origin. His name was written in elegant script across the front, nothing more. Charles hesitated before opening it. In his years as heir apparent and now as king, he had learned to be cautious about unexpected communications. Too many times such letters contained unwelcome news or malicious rumors designed to damage the royal family's reputation. Yet something about this particular envelope compelled him to break the wax seal. Inside, he found a single sheet of paper and several photographs. The letter was brief, written in the same elegant handwriting as his name on the envelope. It began simply, "Your Majesty, there are matters concerning your wife that require your immediate attention. What you will see may shock you, but truth must prevail in the halls of power." Charles set the letter aside and examined the photographs with growing confusion. They showed Camilla in various locations around London, meeting with people he did not recognize. The images appeared to have been taken over several months, documenting what seemed to be a pattern of secret meetings. In some photos, she was handing over envelopes. In others, she appeared to be receiving packages from strangers in dark clothing. His heart began to race as he studied each image more carefully. The locations were diverse. A small cafe in Notting Hill, a park bench near Westminster, the lobby of an unremarkable hotel in South London. Camilla appeared relaxed and familiar with her mysterious contacts, suggesting these were not chance encounters but planned meetings. The final photograph made Charles's blood run cold. It showed Camilla entering a building he recognized, the headquarters of a tabloid newspaper known for its ruthless pursuit of royal scandals. The timestamp indicated this meeting had occurred just 2 weeks ago, around the time several embarrassing stories about junior members of the royal family had appeared in print. Charles's mind raced with possibilities, each more disturbing than the last. Could his wife, the woman he had loved for decades and finally married after years of public scrutiny, be involved in leaking information about the royal family? The very idea seemed impossible, yet the evidence before him suggested otherwise. He reached for his secure telephone, then stopped. Who could he trust with this information? His private secretary had served the family faithfully for years, but even the most loyal servants could be compromised. His closest advisors might feel obligated to inform other members of the royal household. The investigation would need to be conducted with absolute discretion. Instead, Charles decided to observe Camilla more closely himself. He would need to be subtle, careful not to arouse her suspicions while gathering more information. The man who had spent decades preparing to be king now found himself preparing to spy on his own wife. That evening, as they dined together in their private quarters, Charles studied Camilla's face for any signs of deception. She appeared completely normal, discussing her upcoming charity engagements with the same enthusiasm she always showed. She mentioned a meeting with the Children's Foundation the following morning, then lunch with the Garden Society board members. "I may be a bit late returning tomorrow evening," she said casually, buttering a piece of bread. "Traffic in London has been absolutely dreadful lately." Charles nodded but made a mental note. According to her official schedule, which he had discreetly checked, Camilla had no evening engagements planned for the following day. Her statement suggested she intended to meet someone not listed on her official calendar. After dinner, Charles retreated to his study and carefully examined the photographs again under a magnifying glass. He noticed details he had missed earlier: the expensive watch on one contact's wrist, the designer handbag carried by another. These were not ordinary citizens looking to sell gossip for small amounts of money. They appeared to be professionals, perhaps journalists or intelligence operatives. The implications grew more serious with each detail he discovered. If Camilla was indeed involved in some sort of information network, the consequences could destroy the monarchy's reputation. Public trust in the royal family had been rebuilt painstakingly over the years following various scandals. A revelation that the queen consort herself was betraying that trust would be catastrophic. Charles spent the night pacing his study, weighing his options. He could confront Camilla directly, but if she was innocent, such accusations would damage their marriage irreparably. If she was guilty, a direct confrontation might give her time to destroy evidence or warn her contacts. He could involve MI5, the security service responsible for protecting the royal family, but such action would inevitably lead to a wider investigation that could become public. The mere suggestion of an investigation into the queen consort would generate exactly the kind of scandal the monarchy could not afford. As dawn approached, Charles made his decision. He would conduct his own investigation, following Camilla personally to discover the truth. It was risky. If discovered, his actions could be misinterpreted as paranoid behavior unbecoming of a monarch. But the stakes were too high to trust this matter to anyone else. The king, who had waited decades to wear the crown now, faced the possibility that his greatest personal happiness might also be his reign's greatest threat. As he prepared for what might be the most important day of his monarchy, Charles could only hope that his suspicions were unfounded and that love had not blinded him to a betrayal that could shake the very foundations of the British throne. The following morning brought an unseasonably cold October wind that rattled the palace windows as Charles prepared for his covert mission. He had dismissed his usual security detail, claiming he needed a private day for personal reflection. Such requests were not uncommon for the contemplative king, and his staff respected his need for solitude without question. Charles chose his most unremarkable clothing, a simple gray suit that could belong to any London businessman, dark sunglasses and a hat that partially concealed his distinctive features. He had studied surveillance techniques during his military training decades ago, never imagining he would use such skills to follow his own wife. Camilla left the palace at precisely 10 o'clock, as scheduled for her charity meeting. Charles waited 5 minutes before following in an unmarked vehicle he had borrowed from the palace motor pool. The Children's Foundation meeting was legitimate. He watched from across the street as she entered the building and emerged an hour later, surrounded by smiling staff members and photographers capturing her visit. But instead of proceeding to her lunch engagement, Camilla directed her driver toward an entirely different part of London. Charles followed at a careful distance, his heart pounding as they moved away from the prestigious areas where royal duties typically took place. They were heading toward the East End, a part of London where the queen consort had no official business. The car stopped outside a small, dingy cafe called Murphy's Kitchen. Charles parked several blocks away and watched through binoculars as Camilla entered the establishment. Through the grimy windows, he could see her sitting at a corner table, but the angle made it impossible to identify her companion. 20 minutes later, a man in an expensive overcoat emerged from the cafe. Charles recognized him immediately. It was James Morrison, the editor-in-chief of the Daily Telegraph, one of Britain's most influential newspapers. Morrison's publication had been surprisingly kind to the royal family in recent months, avoiding the sensationalist stories that other papers had eagerly published. Charles felt a chill that had nothing to do with the October weather. If Camilla was meeting secretly with newspaper editors, the implications were staggering. Was she trying to control media coverage of the royal family? Was she selling information? Or was something even more complex taking place? Camilla remained in the cafe for another 10 minutes before emerging alone. She walked quickly to her waiting car, glancing around nervously, behavior Charles had never observed in his wife before. The woman who usually moved through public spaces with regal confidence now seemed anxious and watchful. Her next stop was even more puzzling. The car pulled up outside a modest office building in Shoreditch, an area known for its trendy businesses and startup companies. Charles watched as Camilla entered through a side door, avoiding the main entrance entirely. The building's directory listed various technology companies and consulting firms, none of which had any apparent connection to royal duties or charitable work. Charles waited in his car, taking careful notes about timing and locations. His detective work was interrupted by a gentle tap on his passenger window. He looked up to see a traffic warden approaching, clearly intending to issue a parking ticket. "Sorry, officer," Charles said, rolling down the window slightly and disguising his voice with a rougher accent. "Just waiting for my wife to finish her appointment." The traffic warden peered at him suspiciously but moved on without issuing a citation. Charles realized how close he had come to being discovered. If the warden had recognized him, news of the king's presence in this unlikely location would have reached the media within hours. 45 minutes passed before Camilla emerged from the building. This time she was accompanied by a tall woman with short blonde hair whom Charles did not recognize. They spoke briefly on the sidewalk, and the woman handed Camilla a small package before they parted ways. Charles faced a difficult decision. Should he follow Camilla or pursue the mysterious woman? His instincts told him the unknown woman might be more important to understanding this puzzle. He chose to follow her. The blonde woman walked 3 blocks to a black sedan with tinted windows. As she opened the car door, Charles managed to capture a clear photograph of her face with his phone. The vehicle's license plate was partially obscured, but he could make out enough digits to potentially trace it later. The sedan disappeared into London traffic before Charles could follow effectively. He returned his attention to finding Camilla, but her car was nowhere to be seen. His amateur surveillance had failed, but he had gathered valuable intelligence about his wife's secret activities. That evening, Camilla returned to the palace appearing perfectly normal. She kissed Charles warmly and asked about his day with genuine interest. Her performance was flawless, if indeed it was a performance. Charles found himself studying her every expression, searching for signs of deception or guilt. "You seem tired, darling," Camilla observed, settling beside him in their private sitting room. "Perhaps you should consider reducing your schedule. The demands of kingship can be overwhelming." Her concern appeared genuine, which only deepened Charles's confusion. Either his wife was an accomplished actress, or his suspicions were leading him to misinterpret innocent activities. The doubt gnawed at him as they shared dinner and discussed mundane palace business. Later that night, while Camilla slept peacefully beside him, Charles crept back to his study to examine the day's evidence. He enlarged the photograph of the blonde woman on his computer, studying her features carefully. She looked professional, well-dressed, and somehow familiar, though he could not place where he might have seen her before. He also researched the Shoreditch building Camilla had visited. Most of the companies listed were legitimate technology firms, but one entry caught his attention. Meridian Consulting Services occupied the 4th floor, but had no website or public information available. A company with no digital presence in the 21st century was highly unusual. Charles's investigation had raised more questions than answers. The meetings appeared purposeful and organized, suggesting ongoing relationships rather than chance encounters. But the true nature of these relationships remained maddeningly unclear. As he prepared for bed, Charles realized his amateur detective work had revealed a troubling truth. His wife was living a secret life completely separate from her role as queen consort. Whether this secret life posed a threat to the monarchy or was simply a personal matter she preferred to keep private remained to be determined. The king, who had spent his entire life in the public eye, now found himself envying ordinary people who could trust their spouses without the weight of national security hanging over every personal decision. Tomorrow would bring new opportunities to uncover the truth, but tonight brought only sleepless hours filled with doubt and growing dread about what that truth might reveal. Charles awoke before dawn, his mind immediately returning to the troubling discoveries of the previous day. He had managed only a few hours of restless sleep, plagued by dreams of newspaper headlines and courtroom scenes. Beside him, Camilla slept peacefully, her face serene in the early morning light. Looking at her now, it seemed impossible that she could be involved in anything deceptive, but Charles had learned long ago that appearances could be deceiving, especially in the world of royalty where public masks were essential survival tools. He quietly slipped from bed and made his way to his study, where he had hidden the anonymous letter and photographs in a locked drawer. This morning brought a new challenge. Charles had arranged to meet with Sir Geoffrey Whitman, his most trusted advisor and the palace's head of security. Geoffrey had served the royal family for 30 years, maintaining absolute discretion through numerous crises. If anyone could help navigate this delicate situation, it would be him. Geoffrey arrived precisely at 8 o'clock as Charles had requested. The older man's weathered face showed concern as he entered the study. He had clearly sensed the unusual tension in Charles's summons. "Your Majesty requested complete privacy," Geoffrey said, settling into the chair across from Charles's desk. "I've ensured we won't be disturbed." "What matter requires such discretion?" Charles hesitated, then placed the photographs on the desk between them. Geoffrey's expression remained neutral as he examined each image, but Charles noticed the slight tightening around his eyes that indicated deep concern. "Where did these come from?" Geoffrey asked finally. "An anonymous source," Charles replied. "I followed her yesterday and observed similar meetings." "Geoffrey, I need to know what my wife is doing and whether it poses a threat to the crown." Geoffrey studied the photographs again, this time using a magnifying glass he produced from his jacket pocket. His examination was thorough and professional, the work of a man trained to spot details others might miss. "The quality suggests professional surveillance equipment," Geoffrey observed. "Whoever took these has access to expensive technology and considerable skill. This isn't the work of an amateur photographer or tabloid journalist. What does that suggest about the source?" "Several possibilities, none of them comforting. Intelligence services, private investigators hired by hostile parties, or perhaps blackmailers building a case." Geoffrey paused. "There's also the possibility that someone within our own security apparatus is involved." The suggestion that palace security might be compromised sent a chill through Charles. The idea that enemies could be operating within the very walls meant to protect the royal family was a nightmare scenario. "I need you to investigate Meridian Consulting Services," Charles said, handing Geoffrey the address. "Camilla visited their offices yesterday and they seemed to have no public presence." Geoffrey made a note in his small leather book. "I'll have preliminary information within hours. But, Your Majesty, if we're dealing with potential security threats, we should consider informing MI5. "Not yet," Charles said firmly. "Until we know more about what we're facing, this stays between us. If Camilla is innocent of any wrongdoing, involving intelligence services could destroy our marriage for nothing. And if she's not innocent?" Charles met Geoffrey's steady gaze. "Then we'll deal with whatever we discover. But carefully and with complete discretion." After Geoffrey left, Charles attempted to maintain his normal routine. He reviewed state papers, met with government ministers, and attended a ceremony honoring military veterans. But throughout the day, his mind remained focused on the mystery surrounding his wife. That afternoon brought an unexpected development. Charles received a call from his private secretary informing him that Camilla had requested use of the palace's secure communication line for an important personal call. Such requests were unusual but not unprecedented. Members of the royal family occasionally needed to conduct sensitive business that required encrypted channels. Charles made his way discreetly to the communication center, where he found the technician who had facilitated Camilla's call. The young man, trained to maintain absolute confidentiality about royal communications, initially hesitated to share any details. "I understand your position," Charles said carefully, "but this is a matter of national security. I need to know who my wife contacted." The technician consulted his logs. "The call was placed to a number in Switzerland, Your Majesty. Duration was approximately 20 minutes. The number is registered to a company called Alpine Financial Services, a Swiss financial company." Charles felt his stomach drop. Switzerland's banking secrecy laws made it a popular destination for those seeking to hide money or conduct business away from prying eyes. Why would Camilla need to contact such a company secretly? That evening, Charles observed his wife with new intensity during their private dinner. Camilla seemed slightly more animated than usual, almost excited about something. She mentioned having had a productive day but offered no specific details about her activities. "I may need to travel soon," she said casually while they shared dessert. "There are some personal matters that require attention. Nothing urgent, but I should handle them personally rather than through intermediaries." "Travel where?" Charles asked, keeping his tone neutral. "Switzerland, actually. I have some old family business to resolve. It shouldn't take more than a few days." The coincidence was too striking to ignore. Within hours of making a secret call to a Swiss financial company, Camilla was planning a trip to Switzerland. Charles forced himself to smile and express appropriate interest, while his mind raced with implications. Later that night, Geoffrey returned with preliminary information about Meridian Consulting Services. What he had discovered was deeply troubling. The company exists on paper but appears to have no legitimate business, Jeffrey reported. It's registered to a post office box and the listed directors are all false identities. The building where Camilla met with someone houses several similar shell companies. What kind of shell companies? The type used for money laundering, intelligence operations, or other activities that require complete secrecy. Your Majesty, this suggests we're dealing with something far more serious than marital infidelity or media manipulation. Charles absorbed this information slowly. His wife's secret activities were connected to shadowy companies and Swiss financial institutions. The pattern suggested either criminal activity or something related to national security. There's more, Jeffrey continued. I ran the photograph of the blonde woman through our facial recognition system. She's been identified as Elena Kowalski, a former intelligence operative who now works as a private contractor. Her specialty is facilitating discreet financial transactions for high-profile clients. The pieces were beginning to form a picture that Charles desperately hoped was wrong. His wife appeared to be involved with professional operatives who specialized in secret financial dealings. The implications for the monarchy were staggering. What do you recommend? Charles asked. We need to move carefully but quickly. If the Queen Consort is compromised, either willingly or unwillingly, the security of the entire royal family is at risk. I suggest placing discreet surveillance on her Swiss trip. Charles nodded reluctantly. The man who had dreamed of a peaceful reign focused on environmental issues and social reform now found himself authorizing covert operations against his own wife. The irony was not lost on him that his greatest personal happiness might also prove to be his reign's greatest crisis. As he prepared for another sleepless night, Charles realized that tomorrow would bring new revelations that could change everything. The anonymous letter had opened a door to a world of shadows and secrets that threatened everything he held dear. 3 days later, Camilla departed for Switzerland on what she described as a brief personal trip. Charles kissed her goodbye at the palace entrance, maintaining the appearance of a loving husband while knowing that Jeffrey's surveillance team would shadow her every movement. The weight of deception hung heavily on his shoulders as he watched her car disappear through the palace gates. Within hours, Jeffrey began receiving reports from the surveillance team. Camilla had flown to Zurich using a commercial flight rather than royal transport, another unusual choice that suggested she preferred to travel without official notice. She checked into the prestigious Bar au Lac Hotel under her own name but requested a suite that overlooked the lake rather than her usual preference for garden views. The first day's surveillance revealed a pattern of meetings that confirmed Charles's worst fears. Camilla met with officials from Alpine Financial Services in their downtown offices, spending over 2 hours behind closed doors. Security cameras in the building's lobby captured her entering with a briefcase and leaving without it. But the most disturbing revelation came that evening. Surveillance footage showed Camilla meeting with Viktor Petrov, a Russian businessman with known connections to intelligence services. The meeting took place in a private dining room at one of Zurich's most exclusive restaurants, far from public observation. Jeffrey personally called Charles with this update. Your Majesty, Viktor Petrov is on multiple watch lists. He's suspected of facilitating money transfers for hostile governments. The Queen Consort's meeting with him suggests this situation may involve national security threats. Charles felt his world collapsing around him. The woman he loved, the woman he had waited decades to marry, appeared to be involved with individuals who posed direct threats to Britain's security. The implications extended far beyond personal betrayal to potential treason. Continue surveillance but maintain distance, Charles instructed. I need complete documentation of her activities. The second day brought even more alarming developments. Camilla visited a private bank known for its discretion regarding unusual financial transactions. She emerged carrying a different briefcase, suggesting an exchange had taken place. Later that afternoon, she met with Elena Kowalski, the intelligence operative Jeffrey had identified from the London photographs. The meeting between Camilla and Kowalski lasted nearly 3 hours and took place in a safe house on the outskirts of Zurich. Jeffrey's team managed to photograph the exterior of the building, but could not risk closer surveillance without being detected. That evening, Charles received a secure call from the surveillance team leader. Your Majesty, we've observed the Queen Consort making multiple stops at locations associated with international money laundering operations. She's following a specific route that suggests detailed planning and prior knowledge of these facilities. Charles realized he could no longer handle this crisis alone. The evidence suggested activities that threatened not just his marriage but the security of the nation. With heavy heart, he authorized Jeffrey to brief the director of MI5. The meeting with Sir David Pemberton, the MI5 director, took place in a secure room deep within the palace. Pemberton, a career intelligence officer known for his discretion and competence, listened without comment as Jeffrey presented the evidence. "This is extremely serious," Pemberton said finally. "If the Queen Consort is indeed involved in financial transactions with hostile operatives, we're facing an unprecedented security crisis. What are our options?" Charles asked. "We need to determine whether Her Majesty is acting willingly or under coercion. The pattern suggests either sophisticated blackmail or active collaboration. Either scenario requires immediate investigation." Pemberton explained that MI5 would need to coordinate with Swiss authorities to gather additional evidence. The investigation would need to be conducted with absolute secrecy to prevent international embarrassment while ensuring national security. Meanwhile, in Zurich, Camilla's activities continued to follow a disturbing pattern. She visited additional financial institutions, met with more individuals connected to intelligence services, and conducted business that seemed entirely unrelated to any legitimate royal function. On her final day in Switzerland, surveillance captured Camilla entering a vault facility used for storing valuable items and documents. She remained inside for over an hour, emerging empty-handed but appearing satisfied with whatever transaction had taken place. The surveillance team also noted that throughout her stay, Camilla had been extremely careful about electronic communications. She used prepaid phones purchased locally and discarded them after brief calls. Her behavior suggested someone trained in counter-surveillance techniques. Charles spent these days in a state of suspended animation, maintaining his royal duties while waiting for each dreaded update from Switzerland. The ceremonial aspects of kingship felt hollow when his personal life was disintegrating, and national security might be compromised. The most painful aspect was the necessity of pretending normalcy. Charles attended state functions, met with foreign dignitaries, and conducted the business of monarchy while knowing that his wife might be betraying everything he represented. On Thursday evening, Jeffrey delivered the most damaging evidence yet. Swiss authorities, working discreetly with MI5, had identified several financial transactions linked to Camilla's activities. Large sums of money had been transferred through accounts associated with her meetings, though the ultimate destinations remained unclear. "The amount suggests this isn't personal financial management," Jeffrey reported. "We're looking at transactions consistent with intelligence operations or systematic corruption." Charles stared out his study window at the London skyline, thinking about the weight of the crown and the loneliness of absolute power. Every decision he made affected millions of people, but this decision would affect his personal happiness forever. "When does she return?" he asked. "Tomorrow afternoon, Your Majesty." Charles nodded. Tomorrow would bring the confrontation he had been dreading. He would need to face the woman he loved with evidence of what appeared to be betrayal on a massive scale. The conversation would determine not only the future of their marriage but potentially the stability of the monarchy itself. That night, Charles walked alone through the palace corridors, thinking about the irony of his situation. He had spent his entire life preparing to protect Britain and the crown, never imagining that the greatest threat might come from within his own household. The anonymous letter that had started this investigation lay locked in his desk drawer, its warnings having proven tragically accurate. Charles wondered about the identity of the sender and their motivations. Was this revelation meant to protect the monarchy or destroy it? As he prepared for what might be the most difficult day of his reign, Charles reflected on the cruel paradox of power. He commanded the loyalty of millions but could not trust the person closest to him. Tomorrow would bring answers, but those answers might destroy everything he held dear. The king who had waited decades to wear the crown now faced the possibility that wearing it might cost him the only woman he had ever truly loved. Camilla returned to London on Friday afternoon, appearing refreshed and cheerful as she greeted Charles in their private quarters. She spoke enthusiastically about the Swiss countryside and mentioned having resolved some old family matters, but offered no specific details about her activities. Charles listened with growing tension, knowing that her casual demeanor masked what appeared to be serious criminal behavior. "I brought you something," Camilla said, presenting Charles with an elegant Swiss watch. "I thought you might appreciate the craftsmanship." Charles accepted the gift with a smile that felt like a mask. The watch was beautiful and expensive, but its origins now seemed sinister given what he knew about her recent financial transactions. He wondered if it had been purchased with money from her mysterious Swiss dealings. That evening, Charles made his final preparations for the confrontation that could no longer be avoided. Jeffrey had assembled all evidence in a secure briefcase: photographs, surveillance reports, financial transaction records, and identification of the individuals Camilla had met. The documentation painted a clear picture of systematic deception. Charles had also received authorization from the Prime Minister to handle this matter with complete discretion. The government understood that any public revelation of the Queen Consort's activities could trigger a constitutional crisis. The monarchy's stability depended on resolving this situation quietly and effectively. Sir David Pemberton from MI5 would be present during the confrontation, along with Jeffrey. Charles had initially resisted involving intelligence services in what felt like a personal matter, but the national security implications made their presence necessary. The meeting was scheduled for 10 o'clock Saturday morning in Charles's private study. Camilla had been told only that important palace business required her attention. She arrived punctually, dressed casually for what she assumed would be a routine discussion about royal duties. Charles watched his wife's face carefully as she entered the study and noticed Jeffrey and Sir David present. Her expression shifted from mild curiosity to visible concern as she recognized the formal nature of the gathering. "Please sit down, Camilla," Charles said gently. "We have serious matters to discuss." Camilla took the chair facing Charles's desk, her posture becoming more guarded. "This seems rather formal for a Saturday morning. What's this about?" Charles placed the first photograph on the desk between them. It showed Camilla meeting with James Morrison outside the East London cafe. Her face went pale as she recognized the image. "I think you know what this is about," Charles said quietly. For a long moment, Camilla stared at the photograph without speaking. When she finally looked up, her eyes showed resignation rather than surprise or indignation. "How long have you known?" she asked. The question confirmed Charles's worst fears. There would be no denials, no innocent explanations for the suspicious meetings and financial transactions. Camilla's calm acceptance suggested someone who had been expecting this confrontation. "Several weeks," Charles replied. "The question is how long this has been going on and why." Jeffrey placed additional photographs on the desk, showing Camilla's meetings in Switzerland with Viktor Petrov and Elena Kowalski. Sir David added financial documents showing the money transfers associated with her activities. Camilla examined each piece of evidence carefully, her expression remaining calm despite the mounting proof of her deception. When she finally spoke, her voice was steady but filled with sadness. "I suppose explanations are pointless at this stage," she said. "You clearly have enough evidence to draw your own conclusions." "I want to hear your explanations," Charles said. "I want to understand how the woman I love could be involved in activities that threaten everything we've worked to protect." Camilla looked directly at Charles, and for a moment, he saw the woman he had fallen in love with decades ago, but that image was now overlaid with the reality of what she had done. "It started innocently enough," she began. "After we married, I was approached by people who claimed to represent charitable organizations. They said they needed help facilitating donations from wealthy individuals who preferred to remain anonymous." Sir David leaned forward. "Which people?" "When did this contact first occur?" "About 18 months ago. A woman named Sarah Bennett claimed to represent a consortium of philanthropists interested in supporting royal charities. She said they needed someone with access to handle the financial arrangements." Charles felt sick as he realized the timeline. The approaches had begun shortly after their marriage, suggesting that Camilla's position as Queen Consort had made her a target for recruitment. "How did these arrangements work?" Jeffrey asked. "I was asked to meet with various representatives and facilitate the transfer of funds to designated accounts. I was told the complexity was necessary to protect the donor's privacy and avoid tax complications." Sir David placed documents on the desk, showing some of the financial transactions. "These accounts are linked to money laundering operations and hostile intelligence services." Did you know the true nature of these transactions? Camilla's composure finally cracked slightly. I suspected something wasn't right after the first few months. The meetings became more secretive and the amounts of money involved were enormous. But by then I was told it was too late to withdraw. Too late how? Charles asked. They said I was already legally implicated in the financial transactions. If I tried to stop or expose the operation, I would face criminal charges. They had documentation showing my involvement that could be used against me. Charles understood now that his wife had become a victim of sophisticated blackmail. The initial recruitment had been designed to compromise her gradually, making withdrawal impossible once she realized the true nature of the activities. Who is they? Sir David demanded. Who was controlling this operation? I don't know their real identities. Sarah Bennett was clearly using a false name. The people I met in Switzerland never identified themselves properly. Elena Kowalski seemed to be coordinating things, but she reported to someone else. Jeffrey consulted his notes. The surveillance in Switzerland showed you visiting storage facilities and meeting with known intelligence operatives. What was the purpose of those activities? I was told to store certain documents and transfer information to designated contacts. I didn't read the documents or ask about their contents. I was following instructions to protect myself and, she looked at Charles, to protect you and the monarchy from scandal. Sir David and Jeffrey exchanged glances. The pattern Camilla described was consistent with sophisticated intelligence operations designed to compromise high-value targets. She had been systematically manipulated into becoming an unwitting asset. What information were you asked to transfer? Charles asked. Palace schedules, guest lists for state functions, details about security arrangements. I was told it was for legitimate security consulting, but I knew that wasn't true. The admission hit Charles like a physical blow. His wife had been providing sensitive information about royal security to unknown operatives. The implications for the safety of the entire royal family were staggering. Sir David leaned back in his chair, his expression grave. Your Majesty, this appears to be a systematic intelligence operation designed to penetrate royal security through the Queen Consort. The fact that she's cooperated even under duress creates serious security vulnerabilities. Charles looked at his wife, seeing both the woman he loved and the security threat she had become. The personal and official aspects of his life had collided in the most devastating way possible. What happens now? Camilla asked quietly. Charles knew that his answer would determine not only Camilla's fate, but the future of the monarchy itself. The silence in Charles's study stretched for what felt like an eternity, as the full implications of Camilla's confession settled over everyone present. Charles stared at his wife, trying to reconcile the woman he had loved for decades with the security threat she had unknowingly become. The weight of his dual roles as husband and king pressed down upon him with crushing force. Sir David Pemberton broke the silence first. Your Majesty, we need to determine the extent of the security breach and neutralize any ongoing threats. The Queen Consort's cooperation will be essential in identifying the full scope of this operation. Camilla looked directly at Charles, her eyes filled with regret and fear. I know I've betrayed your trust and endangered everything you hold dear. I'm prepared to face whatever consequences are necessary. Charles felt his heart breaking as he realized that the woman he loved was essentially offering to sacrifice herself to protect the monarchy. The irony was bitter. Camilla's willingness to accept punishment demonstrated the loyalty she should have shown when first approached by the mysterious operatives. We need to discuss this privately, Charles said to Sir David and Jeffrey. Please give us a few minutes alone. The two men exchanged concerned glances but withdrew from the study, leaving Charles and Camilla facing each other across a desk littered with evidence of betrayal and deception. How could you not tell me? Charles asked, his voice barely above a whisper. When you realized what was happening, why didn't you come to me? Camilla's composure finally broke completely. Tears streamed down her face as she struggled to find words. I was terrified. They showed me documents proving I had already broken multiple laws. They said if the story became public, it would destroy your reign before it properly began. So you continued to help them instead. I thought I was protecting you. Camilla's voice rose with desperation. They said if I cooperated quietly, they would ensure no harm came to the royal family. If I refused or tried to expose them, they would release everything publicly and claim I was a willing accomplice from the beginning. Charles understood the psychological manipulation Camilla had endured, but understanding did not diminish the damage she had caused. Palace security had been compromised, sensitive information had been leaked to hostile operatives, and the monarchy's reputation hung by a thread. "What exactly did you give them?" Charles demanded. "I need to know everything." Camilla wiped her eyes and tried to compose herself. "Guest lists for state dinners, details about your private schedule, information about security protocols for royal events." They also asked for copies of correspondence from government ministers and foreign diplomats. Each revelation felt like another knife wound to Charles. The information Camilla had provided could be used to plan attacks, embarrass the government, or compromise Britain's relationships with allied nations. The intelligence value of such material to hostile powers was enormous. "Did you photograph documents or remove them from the palace?" "I photographed them with a special camera they provided. The documents never left their secure location, so I thought it was less serious." Charles almost laughed at the naivety of this statement. Digital copies of classified documents were just as dangerous as physical theft. Perhaps more so because they could be transmitted instantly anywhere in the world. Sir David and Geoffrey returned to the study, their expressions indicating they had been discussing options during their brief absence. Sir David carried a thick folder containing what appeared to be additional documentation. "Your Majesty, we've been in contact with our Swiss counterparts," Sir David reported. "They've identified the financial network Camilla was involved with as part of a larger intelligence operation, targeting European royalty and government officials." Geoffrey added more details. "Similar recruitment efforts have been detected targeting officials in Belgium, Netherlands, and Sweden. This appears to be a coordinated campaign to penetrate royal households across Europe." This information provided some context for Camilla's situation, but did little to reduce the seriousness of her actions. If anything, knowing that she had been part of a broader intelligence operation made the situation more dangerous. "What are our options?" Charles asked. Sir David opened his folder. "We have several paths forward, each with significant risks. We could pursue criminal charges against the Queen Consort, but that would require public trials and massive media attention. The security implications would be catastrophic. What's the alternative? We could handle this as a security matter rather than a criminal one. The Queen Consort could cooperate fully with our investigation to help identify and neutralize the hostile network. In exchange, we would avoid public prosecution." Geoffrey outlined the practical implications. Either approach would require the Queen Consort to step back from all royal duties immediately. Her access to sensitive information would need to be permanently revoked. Charles understood what they were really saying. Regardless of whether criminal charges were filed, Camilla's role as Queen Consort was effectively over. She could not continue to represent the monarchy after betraying its most fundamental security requirements. "There's a third option," Sir David said carefully. "We could arrange for the Queen Consort to withdraw from public life due to health concerns. This would provide cover for ending her royal duties while allowing our investigation to proceed discreetly." The suggestion of a fake illness felt dishonest to Charles, but he recognized the practical benefits of avoiding public scandal while addressing the security crisis. The monarchy's survival might depend on managing this crisis with absolute discretion. Camilla spoke for the first time since the men had returned. "I'll accept whatever decision you make. I know I've forfeited any right to influence my own fate." Charles looked at his wife, seeing the woman who had been his companion through decades of public scrutiny and personal challenges. The thought of losing her was agonizing, but his duty as king required him to prioritize the monarchy's survival over his personal happiness. "I need time to consider our options," Charles said finally. "Camilla, you'll remain in the palace, but with restricted access. All your communications will be monitored and your movements will be supervised." Sir David nodded approvingly. "We'll need to debrief the Queen Consort extensively about her contacts and activities. Every detail could be crucial for identifying the broader network." As the meeting concluded, Charles realized that his reign had reached its first major crisis far sooner than anyone had anticipated. The decisions he made in the coming days would determine not only his personal future, but the stability of the British monarchy itself. Watching Camilla leave the study under Geoffrey's supervision, Charles understood that their marriage was already over in all but name. The woman he loved had become a security risk that the crown could not tolerate. The cruel mathematics of monarchy demanded that personal feelings be subordinated to institutional survival. He, king who had dreamed of modernizing, the monarchy now faced the ancient reality that the crown's demands could destroy everything else in a person's life, including love itself. The following morning brought a gray London dawn that matched Charles's mood as he prepared to make the most difficult decision of his reign. He had spent the night alone in his study, weighing options that all led to personal heartbreak but seemed necessary for protecting the monarchy. The crown that had once symbolized his life's greatest achievement now felt like a burden crushing everything he held dear. Sir David arrived early with updates from the overnight investigation. The intelligence networks had been working around the clock to assess the damage from Camilla's compromised position and identify the hostile operatives who had manipulated her. "We've made significant progress identifying the network," Sir David reported. "The operation appears to be coordinated by a Russian intelligence unit specializing in long-term infiltration of Western institutions. Camilla was one of several high-value targets they successfully recruited." Charles absorbed this information while staring out at the palace gardens where he and Camilla had walked together countless times. Knowing that she had been a victim of sophisticated manipulation provided some comfort, but it did not change the security implications of her actions. What about the information she provided? How seriously has our security been compromised? The guest lists and security protocols she shared have forced us to revise protection arrangements for all upcoming royal events. We're also reviewing every state dinner and diplomatic meeting from the past 18 months to determine what intelligence advantages hostile powers may have gained. Jeffrey entered with additional reports from Camilla's debriefing sessions. She had been cooperating fully with investigators, providing detailed accounts of every meeting and transaction. Her willingness to help was evident, but the scope of the intelligence breach continued to expand with each revelation. "The Queen Consort has identified 7 different operatives she met with regularly," Jeffrey reported. She also provided descriptions of several others she encountered occasionally. The network was larger and more sophisticated than we initially realized. Charles felt each detail like another weight added to an already unbearable burden. Every piece of information Camilla had shared represented another failure in his personal judgment and another threat to national security. "Have you reached any conclusions about how to proceed?" Sir David asked. Charles had indeed reached conclusions, though implementing them would require more strength than he felt he possessed. "I've decided to accept Camilla's resignation from all royal duties, effective immediately. The official explanation will be her decision to focus on private charitable work. And the criminal aspects? No public charges will be filed in exchange for her continued cooperation with the investigation. However, she will need to leave the palace permanently." The words felt like poison in Charles's mouth, but he knew they represented the only path that protected both the monarchy and Camilla herself. Public criminal proceedings would destroy them both, while private resolution offered some hope of limiting the damage. Sir David nodded approvingly. That approach protects national security, while avoiding the constitutional crisis that criminal charges would create. "When will you inform the Queen Consort of your decision?" "This afternoon. I want to handle this personally before any official announcements are made." After the advisors left, Charles walked through the palace corridors one final time as a married man. Every room held memories of his life with Camilla, from their private dinners to quiet conversations about the challenges of royal life. In a few hours, those memories would be all that remained of their relationship. He found Camilla in their private sitting room, reading quietly while supervised by a discreet security officer. She looked up as he entered, and Charles saw in her eyes that she already knew what his decision would be. "You've decided," she said simply. Charles sat across from her, maintaining the formal distance that their circumstances now required. "You'll need to resign from all royal duties and leave the palace. The official statement will say you're pursuing private charitable interests." Camilla nodded calmly, though Charles could see the pain in her expression. "I understand. It's the right decision for the monarchy. The government has agreed not to pursue criminal charges in exchange for your continued cooperation with the investigation. Sir David will arrange witness protection if you feel threatened by the people who manipulated you. Thank you for that consideration." Camilla paused, then looked directly at Charles. "I want you to know that despite everything that's happened, I never stopped loving you. My greatest regret is not having the courage to trust you when this began." Charles felt tears threatening but maintained his composure. As king, he could not afford to show the emotional devastation he felt as a man. "I know you were trying to protect me, but the crown requires absolute loyalty, and anything less becomes a threat to everything we represent. I know. I failed you and failed the monarchy." Camilla stood, her movements graceful despite the circumstances. "I'll pack my personal belongings this afternoon and be gone by evening." The finality of her words hit Charles like a physical blow. In a matter of hours, the woman who had been his closest companion for decades would be gone forever. The institutional demands of monarchy had proven stronger than love, just as they had for so many of his predecessors. "Where will you go?" Charles asked. "I have a cottage in Gloucestershire that's private enough for me to disappear from public view. I'll live quietly and stay available for whatever assistance the investigation requires." That evening, Charles stood at his study window watching Camilla's car disappear through the palace gates for the final time. She had left without ceremony or fanfare, just as she had requested. The woman who had been queen consort was now effectively in exile, a victim of forces she had not understood until it was too late. The palace issued a brief statement that evening, announcing Camilla's decision to step back from royal duties to focus on private charitable work. The statement mentioned her gratitude for the opportunity to serve and her continued support for the monarchy's mission. Media coverage was respectful but speculative. Royal correspondents noted the unusual timing of the announcement and the lack of specific details about Camilla's future plans. However, without access to the real story, they could only offer theories about personal health issues or family commitments. Sir David briefed Charles on the ongoing investigation's progress. Several arrests had been made in Switzerland, and cooperation with international law enforcement was helping to dismantle the broader intelligence network. Camilla's information had proven invaluable in identifying and neutralizing the hostile operation. "The security threat has been largely contained," Sir David reported. "The Queen Consort's cooperation has enabled us to protect other potential targets and prevent further infiltration attempts." Charles took some comfort in knowing that Camilla's final actions as Queen Consort had helped protect others from the manipulation she had endured. Her willingness to sacrifice everything to help the investigation demonstrated the loyalty she should have shown from the beginning. As the weeks passed, Charles settled into the lonely routine of ruling, without the personal support that had sustained him for so many years. The duties of monarchy continued regardless of personal loss, and he threw himself into his work with renewed intensity. The anonymous letter that had triggered this crisis remained in his desk drawer as a reminder of how quickly personal happiness could be destroyed by the demands of public service. Charles never learned the identity of the person who had sent it, though he suspected it had come from within the intelligence services, as they became aware of the security breach. 6 months later, reports occasionally surfaced about a former royal figure living quietly in the countryside, devoted to private charitable work. Those who remembered Camilla's warmth and dedication to public service wondered about her sudden withdrawal from royal life, but the truth remained locked away in classified files. Charles ruled on, older and wiser, but forever changed by the experience of learning that love and loyalty to the crown could be mutually exclusive. The king who had waited decades to marry the woman he loved had discovered that wearing the crown required sacrificing everything else, including his heart. The monarchy survived the crisis stronger and more secure than before, but the cost had been measured in human terms that could never be fully calculated or repaid.